Good morning, students. Today, let us study the outbreeding devices. Now, in the previous video, we have talked about this cross-pollination and self-pollination. Now, today, we shall talk about these outbreeding devices. What are outbreeding devices? Okay, then, why do we need these outbreeding devices? Now, if the continuous self-pollination takes place, if you let the pollination, if the pollination is between the same species only, then the plants suffer from this inbreeding depression. Inbreeding means production of offsprings by this pollination between the same or closely related species. So if continuous self-pollination takes place, then the plants become weaker and then weaker in the next generations. So here, many plants, most of the plants, especially this bisexual flower or hermaphrodite flower, okay? Hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodite means the plants in which both male and female parts are present. So same meaning, bisexual and then hermaphrodite means a plant or a flower in which both the male and the female part are present. Okay, so all these type of flowers, like most of the flowers, especially these two, like this type of flowers, bisexual or hermaphrodite flowers, they are developing some strategies or some these mechanisms in order to prevent self-pollination. Now I have told you that self-pollination, continuous self-pollination is it causes inbreeding depression. That means it makes the plant weaker. So these plants, they have both the male and female parts in the same flower. So there's more chance for them to carry out this self-pollination. So this type of flowers, they try to prevent self-pollination, and then they try to go for cross-pollination. So they have adapted so many strategies, and then they have so many adaptations. They have some adaptations in order to prevent. They want to prevent self-pollination and encourage cross-pollination. So some of the adaptations or some of the outbreeding devices let us discuss in this video. So the first one is pollen maturity, okay, or pollen release, and stigma receptivity are not synchronized. So the maturity of pollen grains or the release of pollen grains from the anther and the stigma receptivity, that means the stigma, when the stigma is ready to receive these pollen grains, okay? So these two are not synchronized. Are not synchronized means they do not take place at the same time, okay? So what they do, they are adapted to releasing pollen grains before the stigma is ready to receive the pollen grains, okay? So in that way, they are preventing self-pollination. They are trying to ignore the self-pollination and then encourage the cross-pollination, okay? So suppose the pollen may mature first, and then when the pollen is ready and then when the pollen is released, the stigma may be still immature, and then the stigma will not be ready to take the pollen grains. So in that way, they can prevent self-pollination. So pollen grains from this flower may go some other place, and then it will not be pollinated by this same stigma, okay? So bisexual flowers, in flowers where both male and female are present. Now in in the second case, the stigma may be mature already, but then the stigma may be ready for taking these pollen grains, receiving the pollen grains, but then at that time pollen grains may not be released or pollen grains may not be mature. So what happens when the stigma is already ready to receive the pollen grains? The pollen grains from some other flowers may land on it, and then they will pollinate this one. So in that way, they prevent the self-pollination. Now the second point is anther and stigma located at different positions. Okay, so in order to prevent self-pollination again, the anther and stigma are located at different positions. In a normal flower, this is the stigma and then this is the anther. So it is like this. So this anther and the stigma lie very close to each other. So this is a normal flower. But then here the adaptations, some plants, like especially the bisexual flowers, they have adapted. So in that case, the anther might be somewhere here, like they may be located somewhere down here, okay, and or in other case the stigma may be very at the lower position, at a very lower position, and then anthers may be somewhere here, like well exposed in the outside. So there is a less chance for these pollen grains from this anther to like land on the stigma and then carry out the pollination. So these are some adaptations. They are located at the different positions. So this will help them to prevent the self-pollination. Now these two processes, both these two processes, they can prevent this self-pollination or autogamy. Okay, but not we cannot say that, or we cannot guarantee that this geitonogamy will also be prevented, because like in the same plant, suppose in a flower, these two might be different, but then in some other flower of the same plant, like this pollen maturity and the stigma receptivity might be same from the same plant, okay, in a different flower. This is one flower, this is another flower, but from the same plant. So stigma receptivity here and then pollen release may not be same, but for this particular flower, but then here the pollen release and the stigma receptivity might be same. So in that way, like pollen grains from here might be germinated on this stigma. So there is a like geitonogamy might not be prevented. Still, self-pollination might take place. So it prevents autogamy. Autogamy means in the same flower. In the same flower, the self-pollination might be prevented, but not in the different flower. Okay, so that means these two type of adaptations prevents autogamy, but then it does not prevent geitonogamy. Now the third one is self-incompatibility. Self-incompatibility. Self-incompatibility means the pollen or the flower, okay, like in the flower, the male and the female part, like they will try to avoid its own pollen. The self-incompatibility means pollen grains, like stigma, will not let its own pollen to generate. Like its own pollen means of the same flower. Okay, suppose this is a flower, this is the anther, and then this is the stigma. So that this stigma will not allow this pollen grains released from the same flower. So they will make it self-incompatible. That means they will not take its own pollen grains and then they will not let it germinate. So this is called self-incompatibility. This self-compatibility is a genetic mechanism, okay, that allows them to avoid its own pollen, and then they will try to germinate only the pollen grains from other flower. They will not take their own, they will not germinate their own anther or these pollen grains, okay. So that is called self-incompatibility. So this is also one of the adaptations in order to encourage cross-pollination and to prevent self-pollination. Now the fourth one is production of unisexual flowers. So the flowers are adapted to produce only unisexual flowers. That means a flower in which only one sex will be present. Either the flower will be a male flower, or the other flower might be a female flower. So in this type of adaptations, they have only one male or one sex or one reproductive organ, okay, present in the flower. So this is also one of the adaptations to encourage cross-pollination and to prevent self-pollination. Example like castor and maize. Okay, so in these two plants, both the male and the female flowers, both the male and the female parts are present in a single flower. So in this case, like it can prevent autogamy. That means like pollination from the same flower, but then it does not prevent this geitonogamy. Same like this, okay? But in plants like papaya, only in a flower, only one reproductive part will be present. That means either male part will be present or either female part will be present. So the flowers in this papaya plant or the papaya plant, one plant is either like a male plant or another plant is this female plant. That means in a single plant, papaya tree, there will be only like male flowers only. So that very plant will be a male plant, and in the other plant there will be only female part. So that plant, the entire plant will be a female plant. So in this plant, in this papaya, it is guaranteed that both autogamy and then geitonogamy also will be prevented, and then only cross-pollination, that is xenogamy, will take place. So these are the adaptations for preventing self-pollination and encouraging cross-pollination. Let us see once again. Pollen maturity and then origins and stigma receptivity is not synchronized. Okay, it does not take place at the same time. Second one is enter and stigma are located at a different position. Third one is self-incompatibility, and fourth one is production of unisexual flowers. So these are the adaptations.